Okay, so we're going to be dealing with Tale of the Four. This is another one of the songs of Ehud Banai in our series. Ma'aseh ba'arba'ah is the Hebrew for it, and we're giving credit to the photograph from Veronica Gomez Ibarra on Unsplash. Okay, so setting off, an introduction into Ehud Banai, just so that we know a little bit more about him before digging into the song. It actually comes from his 2011 album called Fragments of Night, Resisei Laila. It's something like his 10th album. Ehud Banai has been a fixture on the Israeli music scene since 1987. That was when his first album was released. In that first album, there were several hits, and he's basically continued to be successful singer-songwriter ever since, filling big auditoria, performing in other gigs, on the radio. He comes from a famous showbiz family, the Banai family. He's got uncles and cousins and nephews and nieces in TV and music. There's Evyatar Banai, who's a famous musician. Meir Banai was a famous musician. Yossi Banai, an actor and performer and musician. Orna Banai is a very talented comedian, and she's also a serious actor in her own right. The Banais are a major family. And over the years, you can begin to hear this traditional, almost religious Jewish Persian sounds beginning to emerge in his music, and also some traditional religious explorations which are deepening over the years in his work. This song is particularly interesting because, as you'll see, it touches on religious and mystical text, but at the same time, when Banai was interviewed about this album, he actually introduced this song as a recollection of an experience he had when he was living in Givatayim, which is a neighborhood of Tel Aviv, when he had a bad trip with some mates. They went out to the local woods and took some drugs which went wrong. It's very interesting when you compare this with the actual song. So I would recommend now's the time to listen to the song. Up on the top right, you'll see a little I for information, and if you click on that, it'll take you straight to the song, and the link is also in the YouTube comments. So you'll have seen at the very end of the song this quotation from the Talmud rolling by. It's actually from Babylonian Talmud Hagigah 14b, not Chagigot, or whatever the video actually says. And it tells a very well-known story of the four who entered the orchard. And I'm going to read it to you in Hebrew first, and then in English, and then we'll dig into what we can find there. Arba'a nichnasu lapardes, ואלו הם בן עזאי, בן זומא, אחר, ורבי עקיבא. אמר להם רבי עקיבא, כשאתם מגיעים אצל אבני שיש טהור, אל תאמרו מים מים, משום שנאמר, דובר שקרים לא ייכון לנגד עיניי. בן עזאי הציץ ומת. בן זומא הציץ ונפגע. אחר קיצץ בנטיעות. רבי עקיבא יצא בשלום. And now in English. Four entered the orchard, and they are as follows: Ben Azai and Ben Zoma, the other, and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said to them, when you reach pure marble stones, do not say water, water, because it's stated, he who speaks falsehood shall not be established before my eyes. Ben Azai glimpsed and died. Ben Zoma glimpsed and was harmed. The other chopped down the shoots. Rabbi Akiva came out safely. So this is, as I said, a very famous story of a mystical journey that these four major rabbis of the time undertake. The four of them entered the orchard, and the orchard is a word which symbolizes much more than a physical orchard. It often reminds one of the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is often connected to heaven, so they've sort of entered heaven. And orchard, pardes, I guess we can get the sense of this because pardes, if you listen to the sound of it, pardes is where the word paradise comes from, or paradise is where the word pardes comes from. But paradise, pardes, these words are etymologically linked. So they're going on some kind of mystical journey. And there are four rabbis. So we've got Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, and we've got the other. And the other was originally called Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya. And this is actually the story where we get the main picture of how come he became the other and was referred to as the other in the Talmud and not by his name. So let's go with this journey. So Rabbi Akiva clearly has some experience. And Rabbi Akiva, he says to them, when you reach pure marble stones, do not say water, water. And so what he's actually talking about, it would seem, is that in this place, in this consciousness, you will see something which is actually marble, but because it's so pure, it will actually look like flowing water. And whatever you do, don't say, oh my God, that's water, because it's not water, it's marble. And to say it's water would be a falsehood, and that means that you can't go forward. And in a deeper sense, we can hear that what Rabbi Akiva is saying to them is, don't come into this place with your old ways of looking at things. You're moving into a different dimension, a different place, and you shouldn't bring your old, let's call them prejudices or your own assumptions into this new place because it's totally different. It's not water, it's actually marble. So they go forward in their journey into this mystical place or this mystical situation. And Ben Azai glimpses and dies. We don't know what he glimpsed. It was clearly some element of a higher truth, a higher divinity that Ben Azai wasn't able to hold on to, and he dies. Ben Zoma glimpsed and was harmed. That's actually talking about he lost his mind. He lost his sanity and was never the same ever again. And the other, the Acher, as we know, Rabbi Elisha ben Avuya, chopped down the shoots. And that's a reference to him losing his faith. And from this moment forward, he becomes an apostate. And from this moment forward, no one is allowed to even talk to him because he's completely excommunicated and thrown out of civil society to such an extent that he's called the other. He's like literally othered, such that people can't even have a conversation with him if they're not doing social distancing times 10. He's got to be a significant distance away from them. If you want to chat with him, he could come to the city limits, but he can't actually come into the city itself. He's shunned in public and othered. And Rabbi Akiva comes out safely. So, as you can hear, this whole story has been turned into a song which talks very directly to the experience of Elisha ben Avuya, the other, talks very specifically in that beautiful way in the song where Banai sings about Hafach Acher, he became other. And in that way he became other in two senses, right? Because he gets called the other, but he also just becomes different. He becomes other. He's changed in a very significant and fundamental way. And at the same time, we're given this as a picture of a drug trip gone wrong. And in that way, Banai, as he often does, combines the old and the new, the ancient and the current. And in this song, we can get a lot of the Israeli themes, that somehow Israel and the experience of life in Israel is kind of in this liminal space between exile and being at home, being somewhere else and being here, being in heaven or being on earth, then and now, Jewish and universal. All these themes are toggling backwards and forwards. We're always in transit in Israel. We're always on the way somewhere, and not necessarily all of us are arriving. We're also going to pick up that somehow Banai understands life in Israel or experiences life in Israel a little bit like a dream. And this song in particular is very dreamlike. We're not quite sure whether it's real or unreal. Therefore, we find Banai posing that question in a challenging kind of way to the listener. Is Rabbi Akiva the role model for Banai? Is Banai this musical guide into this place? Or is he actually more like Elisha ben Avuya, the other, the one who's slightly outside, slightly in exile, saying stuff which shouldn't really be said or believing that which cannot yet be believed? And now you. So, in what way does the comparison of the Talmudic orchard to an experience with kids' drugs experimentation bring this Talmud story closer to you? Or in what ways does it distance you? This idea that all of a sudden this mystical, high, magical experience recounted in the Talmud suddenly is compared to or even allegorized to a bad trip. Does that make this story closer? Does it mean that you experience it in a more intimate fashion, or does it actually kill it for you? What does it tell you about Israeli society that this song, which is on a best-selling album by a top-selling artist, so confidently mixes the sacred and the profane? The sacred mystical journey and the possibility of taking drugs. Is this a good thing or a bad thing in your eyes? In particular, just think about this, that this song about this mystical journey, not only has Banai told us that it's actually about a drug trip, but also you might hear it on the radio. You might be fixing your car, you might be in the bathroom, and you're suddenly hearing about this mystical journey. What does that do for you? Have there ever been events in your life that you might want to compare to a mythical tale in Jewish tradition? So Banai experiences something in his life and finds a parallel or a comparison to a tale in Jewish tradition. Have you ever gone through that? And finally, have there ever been events in your life that left you changed forever? All depending where you'd like to take the conversation. So this exploration of Ma'aseh Ba'arba'ah, Tale of the Four, was brought to you by Makom, the Israel Education Lab of the Jewish Agency, in a project that we've been running together with Moishe House, incredibly generously funded by the Jim Joseph Foundation. Hope you enjoyed it and will enjoy our other explorations of songs.